Sizing the biggest financial fraud racket of century, starring interconnected banks cartel and Donald Trump. Part 1. Why Trump's life depends on winning 2024 election. My name is Arash Shiryari and the date of recording of this video is September 23, 2024. In this video, I will expose a conspiracy to subvert America. This plot is contrived by a group of accomplice politicians. I have never seen a government individual or politicians dare to publicize this plot, even though many of them are fully aware of it. Therefore, if something happens to me after the publication of this video, I want you to know that it was not an accidental matter. Today, this plot has reached the point of fulfillment and its clock is ticking. All the sources of this video are in the description, and complete transcript article of this video can be found on my website, presidentarash.com. My goal of making this video is to make you understand how the politicians are using artificial economic tools to amass a fortune that gives them unchecked power in exchange for destitution of the masses of American people. In the first part, I will explain the function of this grand financial fraud racket, and in the second part, I will use that knowledge to prove you that everything Donald Trump does as planned on comes like perfect pieces of puzzle together to subvert the US and declare himself the new king supported by an army of his rich ultra-conspirators. Donald Trump is a criminal who should have been stopped many years ago, but by bullying his way to the top, by keep borrowing and borrowing more, now unfortunately he has all the economic and personal motives to subvert America for creation of a new United Kingdoms of America. Donald Trump's life and family assets are so much at risk that he would do anything to win the 2024 election to get rid of the international banks to whom he owes billions of dollars. If you think the January 6th insurrection was bad, you are in for a serious surprise. Those banks will cut him into pieces if he doesn't pay them back, and therefore Trump will do anything, including cutting the Americans into pieces, just like he did during his COVID-19 term in the office. The plot is to squeeze the economy to the point of collapse so that they can exert themselves as the lords overseeing different kingdoms in the United Kingdoms of America. Before I start, I have tried to lay out my case in the most plain way, but if you get confused, please repeat watching the video for further understanding. How does national debt money make its way to the economy? Like any vehicle, the elements of this mega-scale financial racket are rather simple. Foreign nations, mainly China and Japan, as lenders. 2. US government as the lendee. And 3. The exclusive club of 24 or so mega-large banks acting as intermediary dealers of transferring foreign funds into the society. First, foreign nations offer their funds to the sale for the US government at a compound interest rate of 3.33%. Second, the US government authorizes borrowing foreign national funds. Upon receipt, the government auctions off the borrowed funds with the issuance of artificial papers called Treasury bonds at a fixed rate of 3.87% as of September 2024. Treasury bonds are essentially a gigantic version of the same dollar bills in your pocket. Next, an exclusive cartel of mega banks, including foreign, notoriously infamous banks such as Deutsche Bank, HSBC, Societe Generale, have the exclusive right to enter this auction. The bank bids on the treasury bonds by offering a reasonable price in order to have them. In this transaction, essentially they exchange dollar for dollar. Explaining predatory lending. Once these exclusive privileged cartel of banks have the funds, now they can loan it at any rate above the federal rate of 4.75%. Essentially, this is the game we call arbitrage, borrowing on one segregated financial market and selling in another segregated market for a gain. Treasury bonds are fraudulent schemes because the US government borrows ironically at a higher rate from China, yet offers it at a discount to the banks. The deficit created essentially would be taxpayers' liability to pay. Impact 1. Compounding interest rate alone, the burden on American citizens. In 2024, only the interest portion of national debt was $658 billion. The Congressional Budget Office projects that interest rate rises rapidly over the next decade, reaching $1 trillion in 2025 and $1.7 trillion in 2034. While in 2016 election, Donald Trump promised to eliminate the national debt, Yet within the first 3 years pre-COVID-19 era in the office, national debt soared by $4 trillion. Post-COVID-19, Donald Trump added another $4.8 trillion increase on COVID-19 free loans that went back to the pocket of the banks through the multiplying lens of the same fractional lending schemes that we will talk about, taking free money from the debt and giving it to the people to make them happy. Today, the interest-only portion of the debt is $3 billion thanks to the compounding nature of the loan and Trump's tax cut policy that caused those problems in the first place. Impact 2. The result right now per person, adult or child, is $104,000 that we cannot afford to pay. Impact 3. Predatory lending, marriage with fractional lending, and circular ownership. A loan racket so good that does miracle even if you don't pay it back. By this time you may ask, so what's wrong with that? Banks are simply using the money that they already have gotten and using it to purchase money elsewhere, although clearly they are abusing the economy, engaging in arbitrage of lower interest funds from the government and lending to others. Yet, at the end of the day, it's just a business, right? It's a fair game. What is wrong with that? This is where we get to the bone of this filthy, rotten racket. Let me introduce to you a little thing called lending through fractional reserve banking. In order for you to understand the devastation of this concept, I want you to watch this video clip that explains it so well.
So if you deposit $10,000 into the bank sets aside 10% or $1,000 and then loans out the rest of your money. The way it works is, say another person comes into the bank and asks for a car loan of $9,000. At this moment, the bank loans out the $9,000 from your original deposit. It isn't there anymore. The borrower then pays the person selling the car, and they go deposit the money into another bank, which is part of the same central banking system. This $9,000 is treated as a new deposit, and the process continues. The money gets redeposited and reloaned until the initial deposit of $10,000 becomes $100,000. The banking system just created $90,000 by loaning out your money.
So essentially, these banks create exponential amounts of money out of the thin air and the money that's already available to you in the economy. These banks use the funds they receive through excessive borrowing and fractional lending to purchase treasury bonds. Once this is done, they can repeat the cycle. Simply, they can take the money and they will start lending out on a fractional lending basis. They continue building more and more wealth while you as a troubled ordinary person have no way out. So they have created the free money in a crop whale while shocking you to the poverty. Predatory lending, which is the process of giving loans without assessing their individual's ability to repay, coupled with fractional lending, is such a genius fraud by the US government that only important task required for it to work is for the individual to keep on borrowing. Paying back is just not a problem. The example of 2008 predatory lending market crash. In 2008, through the marriage of predatory lending and fractional reserve lending in the United States economy suffered so badly that ever since then the US economy is under life support. Given how this market crash paralyzed Americans, one thing that you would think happened is that regulation and oversight would be restored to prevent it from happening. Example 2, COVID-19 predatory lending market crash. When the COVID happened and the government started giving out paycheck protection forgivable loans out to the people, I was asking myself, if they give people free money, why do they call it a loan? Understanding circular ownership. Essentially, circular ownership means big cartels of banks whose privileged members feed off one another by engaging in a series of schemes of another's success while blurring the line of their own profit, even if another fails in the short term. This is accomplished by fixing their financial missions with each other and as one giant beast in a predatory way eliminates any threat to themselves. This circular ownership is not legal in Europe, but for some reason it is legal in the United States. The main issue here is that in any financial ecosystem, resources are limited and the massive concentration of wealth in the hands of a few means devastation for others, leading to an entire nation's collapse. Today in America, many people cannot meet their basic necessities, while 2/3 of Americans say they do not have a mere $400 savings in their accounts to cover an emergency. This is a crisis that is going unnoticed, and Donald Trump's 2017 tax cut is responsible, as he reduced the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%, leaving substantial more money for corporations to engage in stock buybacks and raise the pay for their CEOs. Stock buybacks, which historically have been illegal in the United States but became legal again in 1982, is a method for corporations to artificially increase its share value and attract more investors without actually delivering a practical improvement. Essentially, under this scheme, corporations buy back their own shares in marketplace. For example, let's say a corporation has 100 shares priced at $1, totaling $100. If it manages to buy back half of its share, now the price of its share outstanding in exchange becomes $2 each. Or take the case of McDonald's. In the last year or so, many of the McDonald's menu items increased, which coincidentally was coupled with an 8% increase in the already high salary of McDonald's CEO, totaling $19.2 million. It should be clearly understood that lowering taxes for corporations, which is known as trickle-down economy effect, has been studied years and years, and two professors of economics in London School of Business compiled imperial data for 50 years and clearly debunked that trickle-down economy does not work. Impact 4. Welding of economic power in hands of a few individuals. Thanks to Trump's 2017 tax cut coupled with the fractional reserve lending racket, today about 800 single individuals only own more than half of the entire wealth of our nation, while the remaining 333 million people own less than half. Here I'm going to use the statistics to show the impact of the welding of power in the hands of a few. In 1990, the number of billionaires was only 66, while in 2022 rise to 740 people, which is a 1100% increase. Number of millionaires in year 1990 was only 66,000 individuals, while in 2022 ended up being 21 million people approximately. That's a 33,200% increase in number of millionaires. To measure the alarming level of income inequality, which can cause civil unrest and revolutionary rebellions for masses who are seeking a better life, economists use a measure called Gini coefficient. If an economy has a complete income equality, this coefficient would be 0, while a completely unequal and volatile economy would have a coefficient of 1. Today in America, the Gini coefficient stands at 0.47, reflecting a very volatile civil stance. Mr. Trump's solution for suppression of this volatility is to put the discontent protesters under the label of mentally ill into permanent asylum houses. Historical parallels of predatory lending. Case of US banks versus post-World War I Germany. So a long time ago, we actually pulled off the same escape on Germany through the same exact concept as loaning JP Morgan and many large financiers started funneling a ton of money to Germany by the labels of goodwill that wanted to help Germany reach out from the reparation that they owed. They funneled humongous tons of money to Germany under this plan. German economy was given so much liquidity while under interconnected banks in these transactions were getting richer and richer that it is no wonder they started bringing and installing Hitler to power. Why did Trump get engaged in global money laundering scheme? Contrary to popular belief, during the 1980s and 1990s, Trump suffered a series of devastating business failures back to back. By 2004, Trump's real estate empire came to the verge of collapse after he filed for 6 bankruptcies and 13 of his businesses failed. He initially did play with self-promotion schemes by selling his name to luxury real estate projects, appearing in Pizza Hut ads and McDonald's ads, but that did not cut it for him. Donald Trump, by this date, had accumulated debt of almost $2 billion, and Trump decided to save his career by launching himself in global money laundering racket. Azerbaijan is one of the most corrupt countries on earth, and Trump's conglomerate organization had the expertise to be aware of this. Yet, Trump decided to partner in building the skyscraper with the Mammadovs. In 2008, Mammadov a series of multi-million dollar contracts with an Iranian construction firm allegedly connected to the Iran's Revolutionary Guards. The company was run by the Darvishi family, at least 3 members of whom were associated with the IRGC, the New Yorker reported. Number 2, laundering money fraud with Russia. In 2009, Donald Trump defaulted on a massive $640 million loan from Deutsche Bank. Yet surprisingly, Deutsche Bank continued lending money in the total of $2.5 billion. The incoming loans continued until 2015, at which point Deutsche Bank came under Department of Justice scrutiny for laundering money. Additionally, in 2015, the Department of Justice decided to prosecute Trump's Atlantic City casinos, and Trump ended up paying a fine of $10 million. So this was not the first time that he did it, and he was actually at once fined for crossing the sanctions and money laundering schemes. Trump's sons have made explicit comments referring to Russia as the source of their money. In September 2008, at the Bridging U.S. and Emerging Markets Real Estate Conference in New York, Donald Trump Jr. said, "In terms of high-end product influx into the United States, Russian pretty much make a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. And certainly with our project in Soho and anywhere in New York, we see a lot of money pouring in from Russia." In 2014, his younger brother Eric also told Dotson, after he asked him about the Trump Organization, where he gets the money from, "Well, we don't really rely on American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia." Number 3, case of laundering money from the Colombian cartels. David Helmet Marcia Guzman is a Colombian fraudster and money launderer with reports tied to armed groups. He ran a profitable pyramid scheme in Colombia named after his initials, the MBG group. David Marcia Guzman laundered millions of dollars of drug money through purchasing real estate from Trump Organization Company. Trump, as a licensor, was almost certainly entitled to calls for sales information, yet he was ignorant of it. The methods Trump has engaged in global financial fraud racket. Step 1. Legal facilitation incentives for the return movement of the laundered money. Per a provision of 2017 Trump tax code, corporations can now deduct from 50% to 100% of the value of dividends paid to their foreign affiliates and shareholders. I know that there's a lot of technicalities involved here in understanding how this single change in taxation can benefit the money laundering racket. So let me use an example. As we mentioned, a lot of these banks have a circular ownership in one another, meaning Deutsche Bank, for example, owns a large amount of shares of Bank of America. When Bank of America wants to pay Deutsche Bank, they will use this rule to transfer as much as money they want legally to Deutsche Bank without being concerned about paying taxes on that. So essentially, while Bank of America in the US is subject to US sanction regulations, it can pass the money to Deutsche Bank, which has a freedom of operation without close scrutiny of the US sanction laws, giving full incentives to refuel and repeat the cycle of money laundering to conglomerate networks of their financial foreign banks. Committed resort to an all-out battle to seize political immunity to escape financial and tax evasions and many other convictions, including a rape conviction. Given the degree and number of Trump's involvement, which could jeopardize his family and wealth, no wonder the man has gone insane and is committing himself to any lie and scheme, including a coup to take over America in January 2016. Our Secret Service has literally turned into his private toys to stage acts of coup and plot his own fake assassination twice. Radical promises and claims to the extent of messianic level. Donald Trump's way out of trouble is just gaining political immunity. His only way out is to gamble with the process of taking the power and reversing the damage, including pardoning himself. Washington Post reported that during his term in office alone, he lied more than 30,000 times. Oh dear. Threatening to punish legislators. To punish with him. Before I start to rebut Trump's tax cut and removing all the taxes, I just want you to understand one of the reasons he does this is to get rid of his own taxes liability that he has to IRS. He owes hundreds of millions of dollars of taxes to IRS and so many other things that still we don't know about it, and he was convicted multiple times on criminal tax evasion charges. 13, to punish legislators who would not secure votes for him, claiming to be Messiah and people's retribution, which, by the way, it diminishes his credibility. He has no other cards to use. Telling Christians they never have to vote again after his election, terminating the Constitution, claiming immigrants are eating cats and dogs, using Navy SEAL to capture political dissidents and putting them into jail, making empty promises of eliminating payroll taxes, tax on overtime, and income tax completely. Let's discuss destructive impacts of Trump's tax policy in spite of his outrageous, out-of-the-world lies. Just a quick note. Where are you going to get revenues to support all the infrastructure in many elements that need to run in the society when you don't have taxes? Ideally, if the tax on the corporation was rather increased while people did not have to pay tax, maybe this would have theoretically made some sense. But Trump wants to even reduce further the corporate taxes from 21% to 15% taxes. Essentially, his way to fix the economy is to further reduce the taxes. So number one, eliminating payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are essentially social security taxes for the disabled individuals and retirees who reach the age of 67. According to the Social Security Administration, also 1 in 4 individuals become disabled before reaching the age of 25, meaning your chances of becoming disabled at a young age is 25%. Also, when you turn 67 and no longer able to work, you can collect retirement benefits from the payroll taxes you paid into the system. Also, once you reach that age, everything starts aching, and then there's all social security benefits. You get a generous government insurance called Medicare that covers most doctors, hospitals, and medicines. Chances are, once you reach that age, you will be the first one in line. So also, let's discuss eliminating overtime tax. Now, I'm not sure why he even brings the overtime tax up, because he already has said that he wants to eliminate income tax and overtime tax fall under that as well. But irrespective of that, Trump ran out on the platform of illegal immigrants stealing jobs from Americans. With elimination overtime tax, you are essentially incentivizing individuals to work more hours, which leaves less work hour available for others to pick up. Okay, the solution that Trump is offering is going all tariffs to pay for the deficit of tax revenue. What are the tariffs? Essentially, tariffs are a way for an importing country to demand tolls from a foreign country that is exporting to allow it the right of passage to sell its goods and services in a domestic market. The most terrible aspect of tariff is that although initially the country that is exporting pays the prices, but once the products land in America, the American people have to end up paying that tax, as that cost is reflected in the final cost and price that the goods are offered. Tariffs never work. The only time they will work is if a society is in its developmental phases and it has an abundant amount of raw resources and abundant amount of cheap labor available to it. Imposing tariffs and injecting capital into the domestic economy in this scenario will push the domestic segment to develop itself. The second issue is that tariffs simply don't work, as they lead to the tariff wars. You definitely don't want to do that with the biggest guy on the block, which happens to be China. Why? Because China can also raise prices on a lot of commodities that it sells to the United States, and the United States truly depend on them. Essentially, you're giving them the discretion to cut you off from the global supply and their sales. You definitely don't want to do that also because China, as of now, has global monopoly over the global resources and labor forces that it uses to produce its goods. The third reason is that China has secured itself the exclusive access to global supply of labor and resources. You might have heard in the last few years that China has been engaged on this global initiative called Building Bridges and Roads Initiative. That essentially is a pathway for China to secure suppliers around the globe to feed its massive, gigantic production factory of feeding the entire world. What does that mean? That means that if you want to launch an operation that is successful on the scale of the China, just to fight China, you need to have a large amount of suppliers. What has China done is that it has secured all the supply of labor. So all the doors and routes are closed to the America except that of Latin American labor source and as well as resources. Which brings us to the fourth issue. Trump's way of wanting to approach the tariffs is that even if we were to engage in such a large scheme of fighting with China, to compete with China, we have to employ as many possible immigrants that we can't, especially illegally immigrants, to try to stay competitive. He wants to cut out illegal immigrants who are willing to work for the lower wages for actually a very bad condition. His policy is get rid of the immigrants. This policy will lead to pushing people to hunger and destitution and dying from malnutrition. This is what it means. What is going to follow is a civil unrest and chaos, which does give Mr. Trump the right to declare emergency power for himself on an ongoing basis so he can stay in power indefinitely. And the next thing is understanding from the history. Twice in US history, the all tariff scheme was employed, and both times it led to devastation for this country. First episode was in the 1800s, where the northern states emerged as primary financial businesses. In the 1850s, the US went on an all-tariff regime, which led the US to essentially default on its revenue to the point of wanting to go after the South that had egalitarian society and was untouched from this trauma. The southern states saw the North's bankruptcy and broke off from the Eternal Union. Therefore, the inane all tariffs policy caused the single gravest civil tragedy within America without any foreign intervention. And you can try your chance to see that happen again. Finally, the U.S. came to this census, starting adopting income taxes in 1913, and finally, U.S. started having a budget surplus. The second round when all tariffs were employed was in 1920s, which also led to another great tragedy called the Great Depression. Hoover, against all its advisors, went on to adopt the all-tariff regime and massively slashed the corporate taxes. The result was the Great Depression. Despite all the financial hardship, the United States currently is experiencing the very phase the 1900s Germany experienced. Like Germany of that era, a thriving environment of freedom of expression has caused the explosion of information. This is happening in America, as we're experiencing the explosion of information in America. Many people in America now understand many things that our ancestors were not available. The large beneficiaries of these rich companies are aware of this and are concerned that this knowledge of Americans will lead to them becoming tried in court and prosecuted and going to jail. All said and done, if you're a Republican, I do not blame you. Democrats and Republicans are both guilty of the same crime, as we will discover. The part that you're wrong is to not understand that they're both wrong. Democrats and Republicans are two sides of the same coin, with a small caveat, who use the makeshift 4-year presidential term to legally commit wrongdoings in an organized manner. This needs to no more proof when in both cases of Trump's impeachment, where Democrats in Congress fearing Trump did not even secure enough votes to successfully depose him of power. Many Democrats and Republicans, in hope of securing a spot for their own self-interest, have been leading this event for his assumption of power. The reason for that is that they have noticed an unprecedented amount of support for Trump. Carnegie Mellon, the grandson of Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest, infamous robber barons of America, gave Trump campaign the single largest donation in U.S. history, a whopping single $50 million. They know that people like Carnegie family only give money away in pursuit of hefty return on their investment. All said, American people are once again left on their own to democratically and peacefully resolve the matter before it is too late. It is once again upon the very you, the people, with large numbers, who can reverse this course. At this point, anybody other than the old man be better candidate for the US future. America today is facing the same circumstances that Germany experienced after World War II. If they had been patient and preferred poverty to devastation, they would be much better off today. Choosing between Democrats and Republicans today is respectively is like choosing between poverty versus devastation. Electing Democrats will avert disaster for not giving us 4 years extra time so we can rehaul the system.